Thank you, Murewa, to join us today. And today her topic, she will share with us augmenting education and individualized learning. So welcome to Murewa, and I will pass the baton to her.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. Thanks for inviting me. It's been fun listening to you guys, Wes and Jim, talk for the last couple of minutes and all. So I'm going to talk about using AR in education, and it's going to be a bit interactive because that's how I like to do things. And yeah, and also we'll go back and forth a bit in some areas. And if you have questions, you can ask questions. Just tell me you want to ask questions while it's going on. I kind of like that instead of waiting till the end for the questions to occur itself. Just to be very clear, I'm the co-founder of Marvel, and that's an augmented reality learning platform for English language learners in a K-12 space. So this is my wheelhouse, and it makes sense that I'm talking about augmented reality in education. And so today we're going to basically do going to go through four things, right? We're going to talk about briefly AR in education, and we're going to spend a bit more time in the differentiated learning, individualized learning itself. When you're in education or ed tech, you know, that word gets thrown around a lot. And it's important as technologists that we understand that, because that would also help us be able to ensure that the technology or whatever solution we build is effective, and then it goes and help the kids learn, because that's the end goal, right? For kids to learn, and through using augmented reality, we can talk about how we can bridge the barriers of inequities and ensure that we can get access to pathways to kids and students who often are not easily reached through other means, and ensure that we can talk about enabling language learning too, because like I said, my company Marvel does vocabulary learning in AR itself, and then we'll talk about the future directions and challenges itself. So that's how today's going to go. We're going to spend a bit more time in the differentiated learning part, but it should be fun and all. And so why augmented reality, right? In all of XR, why did we choose AR, not VR, or not MR, or other kind of technologies? Because AR grounds us in our reality, right? If you have a headset, VR, you have to go wear a headset, and you have to be transported into this order environment, and you start to think that there's a distance into its two separate worlds itself. But when you use augmented reality, you're layering the virtual reality world on the physical world, and so you can start to get anchors in places that are physical to you, so that when you're not actually using the augmented reality app, you can still access the pathways itself. For example, if you're using AR apps to find places and landmarks, like, and you can play with it. And then when you stop using the app itself, you can still see the cafe, and you can still kind of remember the other informations that popped up when you were looking at it through the app itself. And so that's more important when we talk about learning in classes, and especially incorporating augmented reality into our classrooms to make sure that they're not being pulled aside and not being sent into like a special classroom to learn. And that's good too, and that's important. But augmented reality gives us more abilities and more pathways to do more for teachers, to enable that they can use technology in their classrooms to teach kids, and ensure that it's embedded into the content, the structures they already have, so there's not much disruption being done, and also aligning it with learning theories. Like we know the augmented reality works well with kids versus VR itself. There are studies being done, and there's some pedagogical parts to it that ensures that AR helps makes kids want to learn more. They're very much awed and motivated by the elements of AR, and it drives their motivations to learn itself, and also drives collaborations and stuff like that. And we talk about AR and VR itself. AR in particular, when you think about the current things that we currently have, they are leaning very much towards STEM itself. So we have a lot of STEM stuff. So you think about math, you think about, there is, participants cannot see my application. Sorry, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, so we can see it.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what's happening. Is my applicants can see my application, so I wasn't sure what that meant. And okay, so yeah, so when you think about most AR apps that you've seen, and I'm sure you guys have some that you've seen that kids are using in school, they're either using it to learn about maps, or they're using it to learn about geography. Geography is one big one. To maps of the ecosystem, you see the kids pull it out and they get to see the sun, and they can move it around to the back and stuff like that. And that has been very much useful for kids itself. And why is that itself? Because they can touch it, play with it, right? The kids can pull it up, enlarge the stuff, and they can see like minor things around the sun. They could play with the different parts of the planet itself, but more importantly, more kids can join together and do like group participation. So the difference between self-directed learning and group setting and also be able to go in and out from it is, it's been very much one of the big things that that schools have been looking at and wanting to do. The other thing is that so I have some use cases for you guys to see. So so learning about word itself, you scan a vocab words and a character pops up, so you can see it, you can visualize it, you can see part of the brain, sign of like science and anatomy itself, and obviously the solar system part of it. Sorry, I keep having to move. I do having technical difficulties because I keep having to move the things around into. So why do we use why AR for us? We say this, that more importantly, one of the benefits of AR over VR is that it increases accessibilities into it, right? Because you're using equipment and tech that you already have. If you're trying to do VR tech, then the schools have to buy VR headsets, right? Then you have to start thinking about whether schools have money in their budgets to buy VR headsets. But in AR, you're using your smartphones or using your mobile tablets. It's and so all schools either have one-on-one Chromebooks, and they have different tablets itself, the iPad, and even when at home, kids have access to smartphones themselves. About 70% of kids these days have access to their own smartphone. They either own it. I mean, if they don't own it, then their parents own it. And if the parents don't own it, somebody in the environment owns it itself. So they are able to use it in the classroom, but outside of classroom. So that's important. And the big thing also about AR and also immersive technology in itself is that it engages the senses, right? You're seeing things, you're able to interact with things and move it around, touch it, expand it, and hear it. And touch comes in when we start talking about manipulables. And manipulables are things that teachers create or buy or have in their classrooms that involves them being able to use as touch points for learning the physical objects. So teachers can have balls, can have Lego bricks and stuff like that, can create cue cards itself, whatever the kids can directly interact with and touch with to understand what you're teaching them is called manipulables, and teachers use that all around. And then they have to spend time to create them. But with AR, you can have those things created into it. There are studios that allow you to just create new objects, and so you can create as much manipulables as you want to provide it and stuff. And so that gets to increase, that thing of experience with coursework, right? And that collaborative spirits between students that increases their learning gains and their motivations to learn, right? And so when we're thinking about augmented reality, the other part about it is also in environment interaction, which is why personally I'm excited more for for Pokemon Go's Niantic's new SDK they released, right? They're now allowing developers to build on the platform that they built Pokemon Go from. And so I'm hoping and projecting that we're going to see more location-based learning content that is directed at everybody, both students or somebody who is learning school itself, the continuum itself. I'm looking forward to that, right? And so the more kids are able to interact with the environment, move around, see more touch points itself, the more they can maintain their attention in the topic and span for a long time. Remember, we all have short attention span, and the more we grow, the shorter it's getting, because there's just so much things that are engaging our senses itself. And so by having that element there, you can get the kid more engaged in the activities they are doing versus getting distracted. And it also allows kids to feel like they're taking ownership of their own learning, right? They're not reading this very block of text. They're not sitting in just one place and just watching the teacher, talk on. They get to do things that activities itself, and also they can determine what things they want to learn, if they want to increase more focus in certain things. And also it also allows teachers to be able to come in and enable students in case they're struggling with certain things, like, oh, let me come in and help you this. And so that kind of interactive element will ensure that we're broadening the experience of students through this immersive world, even if you're going on virtual field trips, and helping them gain practical computer science skills itself. So when we're talking about manipulables, and before I go to individualized differentiated learning, when you talk about manipulables, it's important to think that we're using AR to augment existing materials. So we're not creating brand new stuff. So just all the things that are in classrooms the teachers have, you can have them in the augmented environment. That means that there's less time for teachers don't have to spend more time prepping for the classes. And that's what most teachers have to do. They spend their weekends prepping for what they're going to teach for the rest of the week. And so this enables them to do stuff, right? And the more we create the manipulables, right, the more it contributes to deeper learning among kids. They creates that pathways where they get to remember materials for a longer time because they're interacting with this. And one great application, a company that they use manipulables in augmented reality is called Merge Cube. And Merge Cube is this, I don't have a Merge Cube, but I have a Rubik Cube, but they have a cube like this, but it's their own, and then you scan it, and then it brings things up, and then you can start playing with around it. And so projections and solar system is really cool. I wish I could have shown an example in my slide itself. So now we go to individualized differentiated instructions, and we're going to spend a bit more time here because there's no person in talking education that doesn't come through. Teachers have to provide individualized differentiated instructions and why is this important, right? The very thing you have to remember is differentialized, individualized instructions are two different things. Though I decided them together. Differentiation starts with a group, so you think about as a group kind of teaching. Individualized instruction is for each person itself, so you're thinking per person's individualized needs. So, an example would be differentiated instructions could be for ESOL students. So that's what we're doing. ESOL is English as a second language. So they would usually we take some kids that are classified as ELL, English language learners, into special ESOL classes and teach them as a group separate from the classes. That's differentiated instructions. Individualized instructions could be for kids with disabilities if they're provided an individualized education instruction plan, and then they have that kind of instructions isolated to each kid itself, right? And so when you think about differentiated instructions, it has to be based in four pillars, and that's content, process, product, and the learning environment. And so when and I'm going to go into them in bits. And so why am I bringing them and talking more about it? Is that when you're creating platforms and solutions to target education itself, you have to be thinking of how your platform helps change or modifies or makes those four different instructional elements of differentiated learning better and easier, and ensures that it creates a better learning experience for kids, right? And this is guided by, the kids' interest, their readiness to learn, and their learning profile itself, and whether the teacher understands these things. So the first thing is modifying content, right? And content is just whatever the kids get to assimilate, right? Whatever is provided to them is the content itself. And so two different ways that you could be modifying content is, thinking about ways that kids get access to content. So maybe for books, for example, right, we have the physical books, and then we have Kindles and tablets and ways, and it's just starting to change and tweak out that access to learning and reading itself too. And then you start to think about, the audio parts of it, maybe listen on tape, and also online stuff, whether you're also participating in group demonstrations, and or you can have teacher present like images and instructions and whatever, and trying to make this a visualized element of the content, so it's not just word itself. So the content is being modified that way, and then the process is, you're trying to change how kids figure out how things work, right? Enable them to ask questions, and also enable them to make mistakes, right? And overall, you want to understand the kids will work at different paces because they have different needs, and you need to be able to provide the support to match the kids or whatever different groups and stuff that you want, right? Overall, when you're modifying the process, you're trying to ensure that you can adequately create environments where kids can learn and understand what's being taught, and they can make sense of what is being taught, so that they can go in and then build on it. Then the product, right? That's largely what we think of when we think about technology itself, right? Because it's a product itself. You start to think, are you changing things in terms of a response to interest or learning profiles, right? Are you changing the different timelines of checkpoints wherein the teacher or the technology engages the kids' learning pathways? Are you changing the audience, whether the age, the size, the knowledge and backgrounds? Are you changing how you're assessing the performance, right? Because performance and assessment is very big for education itself, because they have to, the test itself that kids goes to pass schools, the grades the schools get that determines whether or not they get access to funding more classrooms, and teachers get grades to determine whether they continue teaching, get fired, can go to get promoted and stuff like that. Or you're also changing your criteria for how you determine success itself, ensuring that the last one be ensuring that different avenues and touch places where kids, when you're testing them, right, you're providing different elements of testing stuff. So new stuff. And then the last one is modifying the learning environment itself. And that's more cognitive of ensuring that you understand the SEL parts of learning, right? The emotional and feeling of the kids, and understanding that those a kid's emotional journey would influence how they learn at any given time. For example, if something is not very well going on at home with the kids, they're probably not going to do well in class. If the kid's not having time to sleep at home, they're going to sleep in school, stuff like that. And so a lot of outside things that are outside the classroom affects how kids learn in the classrooms. And so technology should be able to also be able to tweak and play on that, right? And to be able to meet the kids' emotional needs, to be able to track it, to be able to offer things that can help make it better, right? And so the two examples, for example, there's some kids that can't sit still for extended period of time. The kids that fidget and stuff like that. And so if you know that your students can't, or you can adequately assess the kids isn't one that's prone to be able to sit for a long period of time, then you need to be able to have them move around, which is where I think AR comes in very well into it, because if you're having them interact with their surroundings, it should include them moving around the classrooms itself. And some kids can't work well with noise, so you can have them put plugs in and stuff like that. And so those are 4 different things when you think about differentiated learning. Again, differentiated learning is thinking about learning that occurs in a group. Now, it could be groups of different sizes, but it occurs that way. And so this is where I get to the part where I said it's going to be interactive. And so I would like you guys to unmute your mic, because we will talk about and go through creating a technology. I'm going to give an example, and then we go through the 4 different ways that we can modify it to ensure that learning occurs and learning gains occurs. So can you guys unmute for a brief moment?
You mean unmute ourselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, anyone wants to unmute, or you just want to, I don't know, maybe we can stay like this, and if somebody wants to talk, and we can just, people will unmute and jump in. Yeah.
Okay. So let's brainstorm. So we are creating a new tech that enables kids to learn about the solar system. That's very easy, right? So it's an app that they go and then they can blow up actually, let me start saying about how the feature is, right? So the base goal is an augmented reality application that enables the kids to learn about the solar system. So how can we modify content, process and products and learning environments to fit that mission, to ensure that learning helps the kid? Anyone want to join in and help? Maybe start from content first.
Yeah, I can join.
Yeah.
Cool. So how can I, what should I do?
Yeah, just to know, we're just gonna talk because you can't write.
Yeah.
Right. So just throw it to me, so we'll start from content. So how can we modify how we provide content for the app? And Jim, I'll mute it for a bit.
Yeah, I would say maybe with some storytelling at the beginning, instead of directly diving into the dry knowledge. Yeah, it's like an intro, for example, like there are some characters, and kind of guide them and kind of make them engaging at the beginning and want them to care about the character, right? So later on, the character will bring them to the solar system, and kids probably, I don't know, maybe kids can solve for those characters, and then everything will be more engaging, and so that's my thoughts. And anybody?
Yeah, that's a great one.
I think it would be interesting to, I have these apps, that show where the different planets are right now. And oftentimes they're like underground. I mean, you'd have to look through the earth to see them. And
Right.
so these apps would like show the solar system and the paths of the planets and so forth. And you'd see where the planets are right now. And
Right.
that would be sort of a cool thing to have the names of the planets in whatever language you're talking about, or whatever descriptions of the planets in whatever language you're talking about, and
Right.
show where they are actually right now.
Cool. Awesome. Does anyone want to jump in and add more? So we have had storytelling, which is very great. Thanks for that, Dominique. And James says, showing the solar system where they are instead of just taking them down, which is a great one. Any other one wants to jump? Any other person would like to jump in? Okay, so let's go to process, right? And let me go back a feel to just remind us of how we modify process, right? So it's about, modifying how kids would understand and how they make sense of things, right? How they think and how they understand things, right? How they figure things out. So back to this idea, we're building a solar system augmented reality app. How can we modify that process? Anyone want to jump in?
Could you start by giving us some sense of what you would do, and then we can sort of think of how that might be modified?
Right. So for me, when I think about process, is you want to make sure that the first thing is that the kids understand things. And so for me, one of the biggest things about process is ensuring that there's a way to accurately gauge what a kid is, the emotions the kid is feeling itself. And that sounds a bit more like a future, but I think it's also a process too, right? Because remember, when we're thinking of processes, we're trying to figure out, understanding, how kids are figuring the content out. So I want to know, when I'm thinking about processes, does a kid like what they're seeing? Do they struggle with it? If there's like, I'm gonna go out, or they're just disinterested in it, right? And so that into it. And then the other thing that I think I should just have this on today. The other thing that I want to ensure is that there's an interactive element with it. That's really big for me when it comes to augmented reality, is that you have some kind of being. Sarah's my co-founder. She's the academic person, and I think there's a word they call it, wherein there's a bit of interaction into it. That adds another layer of learning to it, and it makes the kids feel heard, and it's like, oh, there's somebody hears me into it. Does it make sense? Jane?
I'm just trying to.
You're thinking. It's okay. You can take time to think, and but yeah, so again.
What do you think, Dom?
Oh, I mean, augmented reality can, visualize the 3D object, right? So I think it depends on device, because maybe it's a larger device and kids can interact on it. And I am wondering, is this a virtual teaching or in class teaching, like in your school?
It would be, I'm assuming it would be used, let's assume the kids use it in class, like in a geography class.
Oh, geographic class. And how old are those kids?
Let's assume they are, let's assume they're between ages of 6 to 9.
6 to 9. Yeah. And what's the goal for the class?
The goal. So the app itself is helping them learn about the solar system, right? That's why. So they're trying to learn about the solar system.
Yeah, I would say storytelling, and also maybe some gamification, like each different planet, right? For example, Mercury, Venus, right? Venus has a lot of I don't know, the atmosphere. I'm not the scientist, but I know it's hot, right? So maybe there are some small games we can implement inside, so students or kids doesn't have to memorize all the hard knowledge, but they can just by playing. For example, like when they land on Venice, it's hot. Something like you watch and interact in Star Wars, right? Something that you like Venice, and people will kind of, or kids will associate this with like a desert or something and very hot, right? So so they don't need to memorize all the dry knowledge, but by kind of enjoying immersive storytelling, they can kind of get the knowledge on the way. Yeah, so that's my take on.
I think an interesting thing is, how did the planets get their names, and what do those names mean?
It's like ancient Greek or something. I don't know.
That's very interesting, right? If the kids can work in peers or even alone, and have the abilities to ask these questions, right, and then go and find them, right? Or even there are kind of do it kind of activities that if they go into, for example, if they're talking about a planet, they can enter the planet and they can go find certain things into it, right? Versus just learning about it. That changes a bit of the process the game to learn itself, right? And also, and like you said, there's like graphics and other elements of like storytelling, and it's not just that blob, and it's also not all that you're looking at a planet, and when you click on it, then a description comes up and says, this is Play-Doh. It's whatever it is, period, right? But you can learn more about it. Then that would be fun, I think.
I think another interesting thing is each of these planets has its own special thing. Like Saturn has the rings. How did those rings form? What's the story behind those rings? Jupiter has these, like the giant red spot, which is a storm. How do these, why does Jupiter look the way that it looks? How did that storm form? How long does it last? Each one seems to have its own little special thing. Mars is red. Why is it red? How come it isn't blue like the Earth? And the difference is because Mars doesn't really have much of an atmosphere. And why doesn't it have much of an atmosphere? Well, it's sort of an interesting story. It's because Mars cooled off before Earth cooled off. And because it cooled off, it doesn't have the magnetic field around it that the Earth does. And therefore the sun stripped away the atmosphere on Mars. And so there's all these interesting things about why they're so different from each other.
Right.
With, like, I think it's Venus or Mercury is the one with all the greenhouse gases that makes it very hot. What is it, Venus?
I don't know.
Is it Venus? Is it Venus, Dow?
I think it's Venus. Venus is extremely hot. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one with all the greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
So there's reasons why each of these is so different from the other. And I guess that's what's interesting to me.
very much interesting, right? I know, and so varying the contents, varying the learning gains, it's very, very, very important. But I just wanted to go back and reclarify that we're talking about modifying the process itself. We're talking about not the contents that they're learning, because we already talked about that, right? You're talking about the there's like you do this to get to this to get to that, and you're disrupting that, right? So things like opportunities to work alone, in peers, and small groups, right? In providing group roles, like you're the leader, you're the hunter, whatever it is, you're the one who has to do it. And also ensuring that they're able to review activities that they want to do and decide for them. Again, remember, a big thing that I wanted to push that I talked about earlier, mentioned in the beginning, is giving kids ways to feel like they're taking ownership of their own learning. So you want to be able to put that into it. And then you can kind of determine what kind of roles does the teacher play. Is the teacher kind of like leading it, or did they prompt it and let the kids decide? What kind of learning to the core, and and then all the things that you talked about, Jim, was incredible, right? The physicality of it, the pictures and stuff like that, or like the SAP, what we're saying, solar systems, they're all very different, right? Their differences are all interesting, why they're different, and showing the graphic things, the ring around the Saturn, and using that as an access point for learning itself. So that's, and then the last thing is modifying the product, right? What ways can we change a product that we have? So how you just talked, and it kind of goes back to the first thing that Jim said when we started this little bit of assignment. He said, the apps that we have that learns about solar system, you all look down. I kind of want to change it where you can see it as it is. That's modifying the product. So what are the ways can we do that?
I think Raja, before he raised his hands, and maybe he has something want to share. Raja, do you want to
Yeah,
unmute
sorry.
yourself? Oh, no worries.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Actually, I was a couple of time mute, but I wanted to share something about augmented reality. And the thing is that I'm also working in some projects in augmented reality, and whenever I'm working in augmented reality, I'm feeling myself. That means that is the future, and we can use augmented reality at least like almost anywhere. So whenever we are looking something into dream wise, or let's say something is in our fantasy, and if you want to put in real, definitely we can use augmented reality there. So the most important thing is augmented reality. I would love to share about that. Means whenever we have something in our mind which we imagining, and something, how that imaginations will be, we will come close to that imagination. That's why we should use augmented reality. So something, let's say we are talking about Neptune. We have not heard too much about Neptune in the solar systems. Yep, we all
Mm-hmm,
know about Mercury, Mars, and all the other planets which are close
mm-hmm,
to our. But let's say something is very far, or let's say any other Milky Way or galaxy. I mean, we
mm-hmm,
are in Milky Way, but let's say any other galaxies that which we haven't heard about that. But let's say something is interesting in that galaxy, and if that things we want to present to our students and teachers, then in that case, actually, augmented reality can play a vital role, and we can say like that, hey, uh, let's say we are not only live in this universe, but maybe there is a possibility. Scientifically, it is not proven that there are other humans in other planets, but yep, we can put as a like hope, or let's say we can
mm-hmm,
think about like optimistic way that hey, that any other planets environment is similar to our environment. Let's say we are taking like 21% is oxygen here and 78% nitrogen in the like on earth. But let's say, and that's according to our human related to the nature, but let's say some, maybe we can talk about aliens. Let's say they are very familiar, or they are very suitable with nitrogen. Then in that case, maybe let's say 78% or 80% nitrogen in any other planet that will be suitable to their living system. So that kind of
mm-hmm,
things actually typically, or geologically, we can put in front of to the students. They can literally know more about that, and they can put their interest as well. Something we are talking in the talk, or reading in the book, that kind of things
mm-hmm,
will come in our image whenever we are reading anything. Let's say we are lion, I'm reading a like any animal, lion, right, or
mm-hmm,
elephant. So that picture we have seen before, that's why that lion will come in our mind, right? That, hey, lion has a trunk and big animal kind of things, you know. So something we have in our life, how that picture will come in our mind, it will never come in mind, right? So let's say if I will give you any random word, let's say TPQRS, so, or let's say ABQVCZ, something like that, but that is not a word, right? Just randomly I'm just talking about ABCD letters, but that is not a word. And that letter, that is not a word, and that is not a something object which is alive or we have ever seen in our. So that's why whenever I will see that words, like let's say any random letter, it will not come in our mind because that is not exist, you know. So something is really, let's say, we haven't seen in our life, that things we will put in augmented reality or virtual reality. Yep, that is good, but again I'm giving a upper age to the augmented reality always. The thing is that, see, they needed to create maybe or use augmented reality glass to present those kind of things, or they can use a mini tablet or let's say iPad or something like that, so they can educate themselves, you know. So that's really interesting thing actually. I mean, not only just solar system, but if you'll go deep into the physics, or let's say if you want to educate or teach any physics contents, like let's say to the students, then definitely you can use that things like in augmented reality way. It will be more beneficial for the students. They will easily understand and they will remember it, and they will clear the as well. Yeah, yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible, actually. I know. I
Hey,
know. Jamie, you're gonna say something.
yeah, what I'm thinking is maybe you could provide the user with a choice of the topics in which they're most interested. Like, for example, if you look far into the future, our galaxy is mixing with Andromeda. And so, you know, if they're interested in things far into the future or at the galaxy level, they could choose that versus things at the individual planet level and so forth. So that would be different learning profiles, I guess. And they could make a
Yeah.
choice of that. And then you would have different materials that you would present based on those choices, and different questions and tests and so forth that you would present based on those choices.
Absolutely. So giving kids choices, you know, of how they go through the pathways of learning is important, right? So if a kid says, "Hey, we'd like to do something, would like to show you something," and the teacher comes and says, "Oh, there are two, but you can do this in two different other ways," and then they can come together to make a deal on whichever ones they do, then you're changing the way the kids learn in that kind of the process and the product of learning itself, right? That's incredible. Yeah. And the last one is modifying the learning environment. Remember, this is about you know, focusing on the emotional parts of the kids, learning how things affect them and the effects on their emotions and the feelings and how they learn, right? And so if you think about and I know that I used the example, and we've been using the example of the app solar system itself, because that's the one that readily comes to mind. But if you want to talk about some other AR app, but using the way that, but modifying how you know, the SLE parts of it, the kids' emotions and feelings would affect the learning and how they learn about the solar system. Can we discuss that? Anyone need to jump in? Okay, I can just go and
Hello.
round it up.
What's your question? Can you please repeat it? I'm sorry. I missed
No,
it.
so yeah, it's fine. So we've been going step by steps and seeing how we can modify you know, different parts, the four parts of differentiated learning to provide that differentiated learning. If we had the app that was doing there's an augmented reality applications for learning about the solar system. So now we're in the fourth pillar, which is the effects in learning environment, and that saying that, you know, the kids' emotions and their feelings, it plays a role in how they learn, right? Whether they learn at all and how fast they learn. So in that way, how can we modify the things in our app to ensure that we're targeting the kids and taking into account the kids' emotional and feelings whenever they're learning.
Exactly. I will share something here, Moriva. I will say the easy the system or platform or application we can make. I mean, for the audience who can understand easily, the more easily they will understand, the more they can contribute. Yeah.
Okay, so you're
You want to
saying, when you say the audience, you mean us? Do you want me to explain the app itself, or you saying for the kids?
for the app?
The app itself. So I didn't actually build. I didn't build the app itself. The idea was that together we would build features around the app to make sure that it's targeting differentiated learning part of it, right? That's what this exercise is about. And so we're going through the 4 pillars, and I'm saying that I just gave a very brief description of the app that we're building together to enable kids learn about the solar system, right? In classrooms for I think I said, I can't remember what age group I said into it. So now what features and what other things in that we should think about, that we should add into the app to make it effective in that kind of differentiated learning part of taking into context the kids' learning and the kids' feelings and emotions when they're learning. Does that make sense?
I think that one thing I can identify with this idea that some students can't sit for extended periods of time and they need to move around and so forth. And for an app like we're talking about with the astronomy app, you could have actually a model of the solar system in augmented reality inside the classroom, and the kids, you could have one kid stand next to Pluto, another kid stand next to Mars, another kid stand next to the Earth, and have them move around in the classroom as the planets move around. Just to emphasize the distances of the different planets and the way that they move. So for example, the kid that's attached to Mercury would have to move much more quickly than the kid attached to Pluto. And so for kids that can't sit for a long time, that's something that they can jump up and do and experience in a more visceral way so that they aren't just sitting around.
Yeah, that's thank you for that. Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in? Rakat, I see that your mic is still up. Do you still want to?
I was thinking app side. Let's say if somebody using app, then the thing is that we can put a menu system that, let's say, a couple of topics, or let's say subject wise, so they can go in that subject and they can look into that. Let's say, for example, planets, and whenever they will hit on planet, then all the planets will come. And then after, let's say they are interested in Mars, or let's say they are interested in Jupiter, then we'll go Jupiter. Then Jupiter, that planet will come out like is a augmented Jupiter, and they can go to that and they can see that how it's look like and what are the dots and everything. And also there is should be a notification on side, so we can, whenever they will click on that on Jupiter, then on side by side it will explain the history of the Jupiter, or like what is there actually in Jupiter. That things actually come on the side way, like in a pop-up, that menu will be pop up on the side. So that kind of system you can make in applications, so whenever they will hit, then according to that they will get the information on that.
Okay, definitely. All right, so when we talk about differentiating by effects and learners and modifying the learning environment, right? We need to understand that kids, there will be some kids who need more attention, right? To be able to stick to parts. Some will be fidgety itself, and there will be like the kids that really want you to be like, oh, you got it right, clap for you, make a great step forward, jump this way, you went that far, right? And so whereas there'll be kids who want to like move to the back of the classrooms, they're very shy, might need a little bit more proteins to come out of their shell itself. And so trying to understand that, you know, there's different cultural things, there are different emotional states of of the kids in the classroom, right? And you want to take them into consideration itself when you're planning the instructions that goes around them, right? Some kids might not want to work well in groups. If you're having an app that that's targeting that, you want to make sure that you can able to accurately assess the kids' emotional needs, whether they like working in groups or not. Maybe ask them, hey, would you like to work in a group? They pick yes or no, right? And if it's no, then they get to do this personal thing on themselves alone. But if they would like to in groups, then you can do the incredible activities that Jim presented itself, right? So ensuring that we're modifying the learning environment ensures effective learning, right? Because then the kids can feel like they are having they have ownership and they're determining their own learning pathways itself, right? And so that comes to the end of the brainstorming. Thank you for brainstorming with me. Now, the other flip side of differentiated learning is individualized learning, and that's when you're providing learning on a single person, so one by one kind of learning. You've got to pull and focus on one person because you know that each kid's learn at different rates, and the needs of one kid might be completely different from the next kid itself, right? And like I said earlier, special education and teaching kids with disability is one that falls down into individualized learning, so much that they have IEP programs in schools itself, right? A kid that is hard of hearing would need a different kind of learning from a kid that is blind, right? That would need a kind of different learning from a kid that has some kind of other disability itself. And when we talk about augmented reality and immersive technology in general, right, we're talking about creating access and pathways for kids to be able to come in and learn at their own rates and learn other stuff, and the kids that might not be able to catch in some other different areas, right? Providing an access point or leveling ground for every kid in an education system, especially underserved learners, right? So we're thinking about, providing things like assistive technologies, right? Making physical environments be more accessible by being virtual. So for us and for me, I've been thinking very much is how do we make augmented reality very much accessible to all disabilities. And honestly, it's easier it's easier to build, and I've had this conversation with a couple of people itself. It's easy to think about ways that you can tackle learning for a kid that's out of learning or deaf, because there's sign language. So because immersive technologies are very visual, that you can overcome the hearing part. If you take away the hearing away from it, you can lean onto other senses, so things like touch and things like sight, which is they already use. But when we talk about kids that or students that are blind, then I have been having this conversation for a long time. I personally can't figure out how you can how augmented reality or even immersive technology can be done in a way that brings in the blind people might also be able to learn itself, right? Because they would traditionally learn through Braille itself.
You might use haptic feedback on phones, for example. You could run your finger over the display, and when you touch various things, like you have a display of the solar system, and when you touch various planets, you might get haptic feedback from those planets.
Yes,
So,
thank you. Keep talking. I love it. I love the haptic part of it.
So that would be sort of like Braille almost, but it's usable on a cell phone, and it essentially lets you feel the solar system.
Yes, that's incredible.
I think one thing that strikes me as you're talking about all this is we generally think of students, if they have various disabilities, that they're going to learn less. But the thing that I kept thinking of as you were talking about this last section was Stephen Hawking's. Now, he acquired his disability as an adult.
Right.
But look at what he did. And look at what he accomplished within the context of that disability. So I think that you have to consider that even when a kid would have a disability, they might be able to generate, world-leading insights into things if you're able to package the information in a way that they can access. And so, if you can think of Stephen Hawking as a child, if he had those same disabilities, how would you cater to his interests and his special needs so that he would be able to excel in that situation? I thought that's
Thank you for that.
an interesting thing to think about while we're thinking about these things.
Yeah, very much, very much. My mom was a special ed teacher and also an audiologist, and from her, ever since I was young, I would hear her say things, and especially kids with people with disabilities. I know I'm saying kids a lot, and that's because I'm in K-12 space, and so that's my audience itself. But people with disabilities will say it's disability is not inability, right? That people are disabled does not make them less intelligent, does not make them less able to decipher information or learning itself. Doesn't mean they will slag at school. It's just exactly as Jim said, you got to figure a way to provide the learning in the pathways that they're more used to or comfortable with, right? And that's what we need to think about.
I think
we need to have, yeah, you're gonna say?
I think there's just some phenomenal examples of this sort of thing. Like Ludwig von Beethoven, he wrote perhaps his greatest work, the Ninth Symphony, when he was totally deaf. So there's amazing things that people with disabilities can do. Right.
Absolutely. And when we think about creating, augmented reality technology for them, we must also put in context and things, right? They have to be high quality technologies first, but also the cost must be low, right? Low investment. You can't ask people to pay $10,000 to buy a $10,000 AR goggles, for example. In terms of time and training and all, because this would ensure that they don't adapt faster itself, right? And stuff like that. And also you have to put in context people's cultures. Some cultural cues in different context changes. And I think also this is more relevant when you're thinking about language learning or some kind of things where certain words in certain countries or certain languages mean completely totally different things. And even though there might be not crossing in language, there might be might be abusive or mean word and other stuff. And so when you think about augmented reality, we have to put into context like people's cultural backgrounds and the representations they see into it as it were a certain aesthetics kind of way. And so augmented enables us to create enriched manipulables information itself, and we need to put those three things in context itself. So when we talk about equity and inclusion, right, we can help AR will tackle implicit biases, or AR should tackle implicit biases. When we're building, we want to make sure that we're taking into context that this is especially in education landscape, right, that we don't carry over the biases that we have in the world, and especially when you're adding like AI to it, that your AI algorithm does not have the biases that we still struggle with into it, and increase access to opportunities and create channels for the 3 C's, right? Communications, communities, and collaborations, which largely we've been talking about for the last hour and a few, I think. And then so I want to switch over to talking about what we do at Marvel itself, because I don't want to take too much of your time, and I also want to make sure that you have time to ask me questions if you have them. So like I said, Marvel is a language learning tool for English language learners, which is a kids whose or students whose at home, their home language is not English, so they have to learn English while they're learning their classroom content in school. And study shows that 1 in 4 kids in our public education system in particular is an English language learners and experience inequalities and achievement gap. Just because we don't have adequate enough resources and adequate enough bilingual teachers to provide for them. Teachers are amazing, they're incredible, they do amazing things. They're underpaid, overworked, like I said. Teachers have to spend time prepping for their classes. They buy things for their classroom manipulables, often through their own personal money, in order to ensure that they can provide that differentiated individualized learning for kids. And then you had, now you also have to learn all your students' languages. That's a hard part into it. So we are coming in to help mitigate that gap, right? And ensure that we can enable our English language learners to perform at the rates that the English speaking peers are itself. And with COVID, COVID showed that there are a lot of changes to be made in education, and it also accelerated a lot of changes that needed to be done. So, Jim, I saw that you might. Do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, we have a member of our group. I don't think Emily is here, but she works at a company called Sapient X. She's one of the co-organizers of the group.
Oh.
And they have a system with avatars, for example, that's one embodiment where they can translate between 40 different languages. And so as you were talking about this, I was just thinking about Emily's system and how perhaps in an augmented reality system, her system could be explaining to the student with headphones on or earbuds or whatever, what's going on in their own language, so that they would be able to score higher on these various criteria that you mentioned. It's quite an impressive system, I have to say, what Emily has.
I would love to see it. I would definitely love to see it. Yeah, definitely. And now we need more technologies that target and enable English language kids who English is not their first language, or who are learning English to learn better and wider, and also ensure that whatever we create, is targeted to ensure that it can meet them at whatever level they are, which is why we spend the entire long time in the first part talking about the differentiated individualized learning, right? Because Emily's program might be, I would love to see it, but she would have to prove, if she was going to sell to schools, for example, she would have to prove all those things that is pedagogically adheres to certain standards, and then also would enable kids to learn in the 4 pathways that we just talked about.
What you can do, if you're so inclined, is on our meetup page for this group, you'll see that Dominique and 2 others are the organizers. And if you click on the others, one will be me, the other will be Emily. You could PM Emily for the links to her company's talks on like AWE, for example. And so you'll be able to see those talks on YouTube, and she could give you the links to those, and you'll get an idea of what their system can do.
Okay, definitely. We'll definitely love to see that. Yeah, so for us, our technology directly targets the pain points that English language learners and teachers face. So like I said, there are not enough resources that are available for the kids. So we want to make sure that we're just another additional resources, another additional effective resources that specifically created to ensure that we can create that differentiated but also individualized learning, depending on what each kid's needs, and also depending on the teacher's need itself. And why we choose augmented reality versus VR is back to that accessibility part, right? And like I said, not everybody in America, not every kid in America, or not everybody in America has a laptop or a desktop at home, but we all have a smartphone, right? It might not be the newest generation smartphone. It might be a few years old, might be 5 years old. And so it's effective. And so being able to create more learning opportunities for students that is on smartphones and tablets is very, very important, right? And by creating these immersive environments and by differentiating and modifying how kids learn, they get to be more motivated, and it's fun for them, right? And they can also add gamifications that put in competitive stuff, and then they can share it, they can brag about it, it can fit into their different SEL, back to the learning environments bits we're talking about in itself. So how our app works is it's a mobile and tablet phones, but I just have it on the screen. It's just the mobile look for it. You download the app, it's in the app stores, but App Store and the Play Store. We are right now triggered by vocab cards because we're doing vocabulary learning for our MVP. We're scaffolding and adding other content to it, and the kids scan the cards and it triggers the AR learning experience. So that's how our app works. Our goal is to help with academic literacy, ensure the kids understand what's being taught in class, and can excel in class and go to either graduate, and if they want to go to college, or go straight into the workforce. They have had adequate things to enable them to be successful itself. We're not like most other language learning application, not just because also it's augmented reality itself, but because we are ensuring and focusing on academic learning, classroom learning, ensuring that kids can learn in class. That's our first use case itself. A differentiator is kid-friendly, ensuring that they can be self-directed, and also group learning itself, and ensuring that we can adapt to each kid's needs, we can understand where each kids are, and we can meet them as they are. My team, we're two co-founders, myself and Dr. Sarah Smith, who's my co-founder. She's incredible. And we have other amazing people, doctorates into it, to ensure that we're adhering to pedagogical standards, and also ensuring that our app is fun and effective and kids want to use it to us. So looking to the future, and this is the last part of it, of augmented reality itself, there's a lot. Augmented reality has come far, right? There are few challenges to use, especially in education, right? Privacy and ethical concerns are a big one. This week, we just had to have conversations because we're adding, sentiment. We have our sentiment analysis kind of algorithm in trying to figure out how long do we keep the data, right? It would be nice to be able to show teachers where the exact moment kids are struggling with, but right now it's like, just because of the concerns of how people oh, you're taking pictures of me and storing it, so we don't store it. The algorithm would assess what each kid is feeling at each time, and it will just give a graph and tell you what percentage wise what kids are feeling at each session itself, right? Because privacy, especially kids' privacy, is a big thing. So you want to be able to navigate that itself. Usability, there's still some difficulties there, and there's some ways where it's not been properly effectively integrated into the classroom. So when you're building AR, and we're talking more in this AR XR communities, we have to think more about how technologies we build can be integrated into classrooms more effectively, right? How the adoption rate for teachers is not that high, right? Because we're building in line with what they already know and how they use and the processes that they are used to before. And then one of the biggest part of it is obviously for schools is a lot of apps that we have out there right now, they're not evidence-based content wise, and they're not pedagogical standards, and also each state would have their own standards. And so trying to modify that to fit into that process is really important, right? One of the other challenges for us, and this is also something that we are working on, is sometimes your app would have difficulties maintaining superimposed information. So if you're scanning stuff and you move out of it of a range, then you've lost that content and you have to start all over again, right? And then the parents are like, oh, kids are on your phone and smartphones for all too long, like, you know, doesn't see that. And then you want us also to add that extra time for them. We want to take kids away from being on the phones and tablets. We want them to go experience the world and walk around into it. And so, and that's the challenge, right? And you have to be able to navigate that and show how augmented reality also enables the kids to still be in their virtual and in their physical environment. They're still interacting with it. So it's sure, it's the mobile phone and it's a tablet, but you're not taking them and throwing them into a very totally, completely immersive virtual world itself. And when I use immersive, I mean taking it way out from the physical realm itself. And the big part is the fact that right now, augmented reality there's not much flexibilities when it comes to creating content. So when you build an app, an augmented reality app, you build in for that specific things. The kids can only learn what's in the apps that is provided. There now be very easy access for teachers to say, hey, can you tweak that? Can you move that into it? And that's something that we have to think about, right? Every AR app is designed for specific content. The fictional AR app that we talked about was about, you know, learning about the solar system, and that's for like a specific thing. So you can't use it for something different else. And it might not be suitable for large groups, but we do talk a lot about how sometimes, you know, when you think about differential learning, it's about groups and you have to vary the size of itself. So as augmented reality enthusiasts or XR enthusiasts, we also have to think about how we can make AR work well for multiple users groups. So multiplayer situations is something we have to figure out. And there's still other different target groups in other explored fields that we can apply AR to that we haven't done. And so when it comes to possibilities for AR in education, we want to make sure that whatever we're building adheres to pedagogy. That's very big and important. It's important that when you build it in line with what is expected of kids to learn, the theories and the present practices of how kids learn, ensuring you're adhering to that, and also enabling teachers to have ownership of the content that the kids are learning. So flexibility in curriculum and content creation is a big one. And there are also other possibilities. There are, I'm sure you guys are thinking of other possibilities too, and you can throw it. So any questions?
Well, I have a number of questions and comments here. One is Dom created this wonderful augmented reality app. And I remember seeing a demo of it. It's probably still on YouTube, where she was showing a SpaceX launch at the beach. And she had planned to put in a bunch of other additional educational elements into that app, which I thought was a great idea. In fact, when I was taking her classes, her Unity classes, one of the things that I created that I thought, you know, might even fit into that app was a simulation of what's called quantum foam, which is little particles that exist at a very, very small scale everywhere in the universe. And antimatter and matter particles are spontaneously created, and they demolish themselves when they run into each other. It's something that goes on everywhere in the universe. But anyways, she was planning on putting all kinds of educational stuff into there. And I think that would fit in perfectly with something like this. Another thing is, I'm wondering, are you getting any government grants to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we've been grant for NED. We got 50K from NSF, and we're in process of applying for more grants into
Okay.
it. So
Well, here's another thought. I know with Emily's system, which is so impressive from what I've seen, the hitch with her system, it has a high startup cost. So for setting it up for a domain costs about $100,000. So I'm wondering if there's a partnering possibility that you would have with Emily's company, where the government, you would able to get a government grant to put up that initial cost for setting up the system for a particular domain. And then that would help them out, and it would help you out because you would have access to that advanced capability. So maybe there's a possibility there for both of you to excel.
Yeah, definitely. We love talking to people about collaborations. Collaboration is and partnerships, definitely. I'm sure that if I did a find search on how many times I mentioned collaborations in my presentation, or probably a lot, right? So that's a big part of it.
Well, one thing about Dom's little augmented reality demonstration at the beach with the SpaceX launch, that's getting kids out in the real world. And so they're not sitting in their room, holed up in their room with their face glued on to some VR device or something. Right. So maybe that addresses part of the parental concerns of, my kid just is glued to this thing in the room. We want to get them outside more and so forth. So that would allow them to get out in the world and do their augmented reality learning there.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think, Dom?
I think, yeah, I think it's great. And I think the, gamification is great for kids to learn things, and especially with AR. Yeah. And something that, I mean, right now, just like you said, that we need more content, right? And it's much easier to write, a textbook, which you don't need a lot of creativity, just write down the facts and people need to memorize. How can we turn the dry textbooks into a game, and that game makes sense and the game can expand, right? I know there are a lot of kids kind of like a playbook or some video games, but that is more limited to more younger kids. Something like a turbo, like the turbo space. That one is a little too hard. I was trying to play and I find out the knowledge requirement was too high. I need to watch YouTube channel and see how rocket launch. And there's a certain angle you need to shoot to orbit, right? And the orbit needs to follow the Earth's orbit, and then at the end it will shoot somewhere. So it's not like, oh, I want to end to the moon and I just go directly to the moon. It's much more complicated. And assembling rocket, I feel like that's kind of like a game, and you are trying to monetize your space station in turbo space. However, I find out that's for a really nerdy kids who can really play it. I don't know. When I play it, I need to learn a lot of stuff. But it's really interesting to see stuff. And I remember Elon Musk said that when he gave his kid to play games, he want the games has education purpose. Yeah. And he also said that education is really hard. It's much harder than, sending a rocket to Mars. Like changing the education system in US is so much harder than sending a spaceship to Mars. So I think, this is a good area to explore. And I remember one of the talk, he talked with the founder of Khan Academy. The guy, like, those super smart guy. and they were talking about Elon Musk kind of like a dream school will be, like acting, like it's kind of like everything is so creative that they let the kids to create its own world using everything they learned and very hands-on. So yeah, I mean, currently, I mean, my background is from Asian background, which how I learned English? I bought a
Wow.
dictionary and I tear up the binder.
Binder.
And yeah, and there are 26 letters, right? And I kind of, tear it up into 26 little books and I staple it. Every day I just take that book and memorize each words. That's how I learned English when I was in high school. It's no fun. Just everything is memorized. Yeah. When I was in Taiwan. Yeah. So, and we have so many boring tests and everything is through memorization. And for me, I think it's much better to just have more immersive learning. And have you tried, there's a app in Oculus Quest, it's called Mondly or something. It's like a learning.
Mondly VR. Yeah.
And that one, I think it's kind of something very cool because we always said that, if you want kids to learn a very good English, you just send them to English speaking countries, right? And I was fortunate that my mom sent me to different countries, English speaking countries such as Australia, New Zealand, England, and some English speaking countries for summer camp when I was young. So yeah, so I feel like the school system was definitely a little outdated, and just like you said, that teachers sometimes not really good in technology, right? And also lawyer, right? I mean, our regulations not really keeping up with the technology. So yeah, I find out that there's a disconnection between what we really want to do and also the content creators. It's like the disconnection between them. They know the knowledge, but they don't know the technology. A lot of parts that is disconnected. Yeah, that's my thoughts. Yeah.
One aspect of this that might be interesting is something that is sort of an add-on that parents could buy for their kids. Where, for example, I have a friend who's now a theoretical physicist. And in high school, he read something called the Feynman Lectures on Physics. Now, Richard Feynman, who wrote those books, there's a series of 3 books, he got the Nobel Prize in physics. And so and he was just an incredible teacher at Caltech. He was so good at making various aspects of physics understandable. And so my friend read these books in high school. Now, he's very unusual, this friend of mine, but that gave him such an incredible leg up when he went to college and applied to colleges and so forth. There's another book called The Evolution of Physics, written by Albert Einstein and Leopold Infeld. And I read that in junior high. It's just an incredible book. And it really does a good job of explaining how physics works at sort of the level before you get to the Nobel Prize winning Richard Feynman. And so there are areas where motivated kids can learn these things, things that they can learn from. And there are some kids that will really excel. And so I know, like when I was in grade school, we had the SRA kit, which was a reading system, and you would go through at your own pace, and you'd go through this card system and learn things and take tests and try to move through as quickly as you could. And that was very exciting to me. And my wife took it too. It was very exciting to her. And so we were able to advance using that kind of stuff. So there are certain things that kids can use to really learn stuff. And sometimes they just catch on fire when you when you introduce these things to them. And so I just wonder if there is a future, not necessarily going through the educational system, like Elon Musk said is very difficult to change in the US, but adding sort of an add-on system to that, where if you've got some bright kids, they can really excel if they're presented with the right material. So maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a product there. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. There's a lot to unravel. I think education, especially for immersive technology, has incredible potential, right? And we just have to have these questions, and we have to have these conversations in order to find solutions that would make easier the learning processes that we're frustrated with, that we know isn't effective enough itself. And so, yeah, definitely.
I know I have a lot of nephews and nieces. I think probably 40 or so. I haven't counted them recently, but a lot of them complained to me when we had the No Child Left Behind system first started. They were spending a lot of time drilling on facts, like Dominique went through with her educational system when she was growing up. And they were very frustrated with that. They thought that they were wasting their time on that. So maybe a lot of learning potential was wasted during that period because there was nothing presented to the kids where they could really excel in something that was of interest to them.
Yes. You nailed it on the head. Itself, when you have rudimentary learning that easily bores out kids, when you mandate kids to learn, it kind of bores them out instead. But more importantly, the bigger part is that not everybody learns the same way, right? And so when you say this way you have to learn, what you're just doing is ensuring that people whose natural abilities to learn that way, they're going to excel, and everybody else will flunk out, and they were like, they're all the bad words. And it's like, no, you're just not meeting them in the learning pathways that is whatever brainwave into it. Does that make sense, right? And so some kids some kids struggle with facts, right? Or some kids struggle with regurgitating, like how Dominique said, she learned by having to cram all those words itself and memorize them. And not everybody has that. Not everybody will be good at that kind of ability itself. Some kids will struggle with it. And you're assuming they're not learning. No, then it's not that they're not good at, or it's not that they wouldn't be able to learn what you're learning or teaching them. It's that pathways or that kind of process of teaching, where it's like cramming itself, does not suit the way they learn. So we need to diversify how we teach.
I wonder if there's a way, I don't know if these advertisements still run, but there used to be ads that said, take this test on learning to draw, and if you do well on this, then you can join our academy or whatever and learn to draw, and maybe that will become a profession for you. I wonder if there are tests, if you could present it this way. We have a learning system that can be used in addition to the traditional educational system. And what you can do is your kid can run through these little tests on our app or whatnot. And if they do well on some of these tests, then we've identified some ways in which they may be very, very good at learning something. And then we can give them some coursework in that style that they seem to be very accepting of and very good at learning with. And so maybe that would be a way to expand your business opportunities.
Absolutely. And by doing exactly what you just said, you're differentiating the learning itself.
Yes.
You're going through the process, right? And so yeah. So there's many opportunities to come in, and many things to be solved in the education ecosystem, and not just the education ecosystem, the way we learn in general, right? Because learning also occurs outside classrooms in school environment, right? People learn because we're humans, we learn itself. And so the mired stuff, we just have to recognize that people learn at different paces and they learn at different rates. Different things affects different people differently, and that affects how they learn. And then being able to stagger that and create different ways of learning in different pathways of learning is just the most effective way to ensure that everybody can have access and learn whatever we're building.
Is there any
benefit.
research? Is there any research? I mean, you've got some PhDs in your company there. Is there
Yeah.
any research on that identifies very specifically different ways of learning?
Yes, there are, but I don't have them. I won't be able to quote them because I'm not a researcher, but there are fields that are spent on how to learn itself. And one of the person, Dr. Callows, she is her area of expertise is ensuring that you create the pedagogical approach to creating content curriculum that helps kids learn. And so every single thing that we do, even colors, whatever it is, every single thing in our app must go through her first, because then she weighs it down on her years of research and whatever to see if it would be suited for the kid, whatever age group that we're targeting, because they already knew that. They spent all their decades of their life researching that.
And I wonder if she's got, you say it's hard to come up with data. I wonder if she's got any data
She
on
probably has.
how specifically on how well, like, the educational system in the US utilizes those different ways of learning, and where the gaps are, what they're not utilizing that may be useful. And that would give you some data for supporting this other approach where you layer additional types of learning onto the US school system.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely. So for me, when they say different types, so I come, so so there's something called a VAK learning style. It's VARK, and it means visual, auditory, kinetic, and reading and writing. That's the known 4 types of learning itself, right? So for me, for example, I'm a visual learner, but I'm also a kinetic learner. I have to do things. So for example, I always have books. I always have stuff. If I write things, it sticks faster, right? Because I'm doing something, right? But I also need to, and then also I'm seeing myself do it. So that sticks very much faster. And so, and then some people are reading and writing, and they would do well on things like SATs and prep testing too. So there's myriad of research. If you type research on different, if you just go to ask Google and say research on different types of learning, a bunch of stuff will come up that are on journals, papers, and a lot of things that ends with edu. So they're coming from universities itself. And it tells you how best the kids learn, right? Because once you know what kind of learner that kid is, the way a visual learner learns is different from the way an auditory person learns. So you need to layer it and meet them in the different pathways.
I'm very visually oriented, and a lot of, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And what I've given a lot of presentations in like academia and in industry, and what I'm always trying to do is, when you're talking to someone, you're often trying to create a picture in their mind. And so what I try to do is just give them that picture to start out with. And then it's much easier to discuss what you're trying to impart to them. So I can see how these different modes of learning can be very different, be very important.
Yeah, definitely. No, but yeah.
Wes, we haven't heard anything out of you. You must have something interesting to say about this. Maybe he's not at his computer.
Hello. Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, I was a little busy. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it is very interesting, Jim, Murewa, and Tom as well. But pretty cool idea about this, all the things about augmented reality and all kind of things. But currently, I wanted to know from you guys. Let me know. I mean, let's say if we have one idea, or let's say if you want to work on that idea and want to start something to build. I'm currently working on that. But what do you think about that marketing, and also someone can put the money behind it? Because let's say it's not possible to, if we have idea and if we will work on that, and how we will, I mean, market it so that people can put the money, or like investors, they can invest the money on our idea. Any idea on that? I would love to know about that.
For me to ask you to invest money?
Anybody, just randomly. Yeah. Go ahead, Murewa.
I can't. I don't know. I can't help with an investment, unfortunately.
Jim, do you have anything in your mind?
Well, perhaps there are some government contracts that are out there. And we talked a little bit about that.
Okay.
Maria, are these mainly federal contracts that you're seeing, or state contracts, or what, when it comes to government contracts?
For us, it's literally been federal and all. I do know a friend who brought me into like a state one, but it wasn't a state we're targeting itself. But states do also have the stuff. They just usually have their own portal, and then when they put their RFPs, this request for proposals, then you can answer them. Versus federal ones. The federal ones, you often know what kind of so the big ones that we look at SBR, that's small business something research, and all major federal small business innovation research, all major federal government departments. So you have education, healthcare, DOD, whatever it is, aviation, even marines, and the people that study water and the ecological ecosystems. They all would give small grants.
Now, did you mention that you had some NSF grants?
Yeah, so we did NSF Cup. So we already did NSF. We already got money from NSF, and we're also looking at also getting an SBR from them, whatever more.
I believe one of the advantages of the SBIR grants is that if you generate intellectual property as part of that contract, that you get to keep the rights to that intellectual property. I don't know. So for example, if you come up with some,
I don't know about that. Like, I don't know down to the nitty gritty enough to talk about the legality of ownership of that.
I think that's the case with the SBIR grants. I don't know about the NSF grants, but I know
the NSF grant is an SBIR grant. So that's what I'm saying. So the NSF has part of it is SBIR, but they also have different types. They would have an SCR. There are different types into it. Well, whatever criteria or requirements usually fits for most of it into it. But they would have certain, I know the requirements that, if you get money from the government, then all your production should be in the United States. Like, everything you use the money for should be spent on the United States. But I'm not very much sure about ownership of the stuff. There's an assumption, but I think the reason why I'm skeptical, because it's like, this is recorded. I don't want to say something that's factually not right, but I know that the government might have I can't remember what it is, like, is it like a plus right to it? But the government usually doesn't holler, like they haven't in a long time. There's no need for them to say, hey, this is us, we funded it, so it's ours. There, but I can't. You have to look at HSBR.
I think it's something worth looking into if you're.
But I recommend it.
Yeah, if you're looking into the SBI grants, the intellectual property rights is something worth looking into, and that could be a game changer for a small business. Because if you're coming up with innovative stuff, and if you can keep the rights to that, then that's a huge plus.
Yeah. Yep. So I just Googled that. You have the rights to own the data and inventions we develop with ASBR funds.
Because I need to stop now. I mean, I will join next time, but it was really nice to talk with you, all of you, and it was a great time. I'm always interested to join this meeting so I can learn every time something new in this meetup link, so in meeting. So definitely would love to join next time, next week, with any different topic, but thank you so much. Yeah, have a nice weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, cool. And see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good way to segue into closing, because we're right at